order the meeting of the Planning Commission for the City of Oregon City, July 10th, 2023. We'll start with roll call, please.
Commissioner LaSalle?
Commissioner LaSalle wanted me to pass along that he is most likely going to be absent and not going to be able to join virtually. He wanted me to let you know that he had a surgery recently that he's recovering from, and it has taken longer than he had expected.
Commissioner Staggs?
Present.
Commissioner West?
Here.
Commissioner Laws?
Which one was on?
Here. Commissioner Espy?
Here.
Vice Chair Schlagenhofer?
Present.
Chair Stoll?
Present. All right, we'll move on to public comment. Are there any comments for items not on the agenda? Oh.
There's no one online.
Okay, I'll move on to the public hearing. Let's start with the script. Public hearings on land use applications are scheduled for tonight. Our role is to conduct the public hearing and to make decisions about the matter before us. In making those decisions, we must apply the applicable codes and laws and cannot vary from or change those laws or codes. A staff report has been prepared for each application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria, which are contained in the staff report. The hearing procedure that the Planning Commission will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps are shown on the Planning Commission website and the door. Public testimony will be called on in the order it was requested. If you wish to testify in person, please fill out a speaker card available at the back of the room. If you wish to testify virtually, you will be called either from a request to speak emailed to city staff at planning@orcity.org in advance of this meeting, or by raising your virtual or physical hand when I ask if there are others in the audience who would like to participate. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name and city of residence. If you would like to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please state your mailing address or email address. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. Any person may submit written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to the city staff while the record is open. If they are not given to staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the initial hearing is closed. If the Planning Commission makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue you may wish to appeal must have been raised before the Planning Commission in order to be considered by the City Commission and, in the event of further appeal, to the Land Use Board of Appeals. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient detail and accompanied by statements or evidence allowing the city and all parties to respond, the issue will not be considered on appeal. In addition to participating orally or in writing and raising all issues during the Planning Commission proceeding, the filing of an appeals must include the required fee. A city-recognized neighborhood association may request waiver of an appeal fee subject to the requirements set forth in Oregon City Municipal Code 17.50.19C5 and 17.50.29C. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient detail to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Now we will open the public hearing for Oregon City file number GLUA 23-00012 and MAS 23-00001, Clackamette Park Master Plan and General Development Plan. Members of the Planning Commission are to be unbiased. As a result, I will call on each commissioner to disclose any potential conflicts, such as family, financial, or business relationships with any of the applicants or with regard to the land in question. I will also ask whether any of the planning commissioners have discussed the application in question with any of the parties or have independent knowledge of relevant facts, such as from a visit to the site in question. Any member of the audience may question any planning commissioner about their disclosures. At this point, does any commissioner have any conflicts of interest, ex parte contact, bias, or other statement to declare or have visited the site? If there was a site visit, the planning commissioner must declare what he or she perceived. Let's start with Commissioner Staggs. Sorry? Disclosures.
No, I have no conflict of interest.
Commissioner Laws?
I have been at the site in the past, but I haven't been there anytime recently. I have no conflicts of interest, no bias.
Vice Chair Schlagenhofer?
No conflicts of interest, no ex parte contact, no bias, and no new site visits since last meeting.
Commissioner West?
Was red. No bias and no ex parte contact, although I will declare I watched the Oregon City Park and Recs Advisory Committee and listened to the consultant present this whole plan. And I haven't been by, I've been at of course, the park many times through the years, but I have not been by in the last 2 to 4 weeks or anything to look at this specifically for the plan.
All right, Commissioner Espy?
I visited the site in the past, but I don't have any conflicts of interest or bias.
And I have no conflicts of interest, ex parte contact, or bias. I have not visited the site since the last meeting. Does anyone in the audience wish to question any of the planning commissioners about these disclosures? All right, we will commence with the staff report.
Thank you, Chair Stoll, and good evening, planning commissioners. My name is Pete Walter, and I'm the planning manager. Our public hearing tonight's continued from June 26th, 2023. And the reason for this continuation was for us to do some additional research related to a couple of parcels that are proposed for the park, RV park. I'll briefly go back over the existing conditions and the proposed general development plan. Could you advance the slide? And maybe, there we go. So today, the park encompasses 25 acres. It is a charter park located at the confluence of the Willamette and Clackamette rivers. It is our only designated regional park, and it sees heavy use from not only Oregon City residents, but throughout the region. Currently, the park includes an RV park along the shore of the Willamette River, playgrounds, shelters, horseshoe pits, picnic areas, the boat ramp, the skate park, the RV dump station, pathways, restrooms, and parking facilities for both cars and vehicles with trailers. Next slide, please. The current conceptual master plan will reorient the entry into the park at Clackamette Drive so that it is safer. There will be upgraded site pedestrian and vehicle circulation, new parking areas, new motorized boat launch facility. The existing boat ramp will be renovated to allow only human-powered craft. There'll be new play areas and large flexible open lawn spaces. The RV park is proposed to be moved out of the floodplain, away from the river, across Clackamette Drive onto 2 parcels that are currently used for overflow parking from the park. And as I will discuss, that will require amendments to the comprehensive plan and zoning map and code. And there is also proposed to be upgraded restrooms, an expanded skate park, sports courts, art installations, and extensive habitat restoration that includes plantings of native trees, shrubs, and ground cover. Next slide, please. So with respect to the area of the master plan that is proposed to be an RV park, that is 2 additional acres, it's 2 tax lots. In order for that site, which is zoned mixed use downtown, to be used in that manner for overnight camping in an RV, that will require a comprehensive plan amendment from the current designation, which is mixed use downtown, to the comp plan designation of public, and a rezoning from mixed use downtown to I institutional, as well as a text amendment to the zoning code for the institutional zone to allow an RV park use. And staff has provided revised findings in the staff report on page 14 with a recommended condition of approval that prior to any subsequent development of those two parcels as an RV park, these three steps would need to be taken. And that will be a separate type 4 process. And that is a condition of approval number 32 in your packet. If it turns out that rezoning does not occur for whatever reason, the applicant will need to amend the master plan to either remove that parcel from the master plan or propose a different use that is permitted in the mixed-use downtown zone for the master plan. And that's the way we've crafted that condition of approval right now. Next slide, please. So the land use process. The reason that this is a general development plan, which is before you tonight, is because the city code requires a master plan for institutionally zoned properties over 10 acres in size. And this is a conceptual plan that the city must approve in order to allow for more detailed site planning. And this plan does draw upon the direction of several previously adopted city plans, and that includes the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, the Trails Master Plan, the 1999 Waterfront Master Plan, and the 2002 Downtown Community Plan. The design and improvements that are shown conceptually in the General Development Plan were developed through a separate public process. And approval of the General Development Plan will allow the Parks Department to pursue funding to further plan and implement the master plan. So the chart that you were just showing illustrates where that rezoning will occur, and that has to occur prior to any subsequent site development, which can be done through detailed development plan or possibly through minor site plan or some other process. And if need be, the plan can also be amended in order to accommodate any changes that might occur between the Planning Commission's approval of this tonight and anything that happens in the next 20 years if it changes. So staff's crafted this recommended condition of approval for parcels 2E30 tax lot 601 and 22E30 tax lot 500 to be used for a city-owned RV park, subject to the 3 steps that I've already talked about. Also wanted to, next slide, please. We also did hear comments from both the public and the Planning Commission on June 26th with respect to various site design and amenities that people would like to see, and that included consideration of permanent and accessible fishing areas, concern for the removal of the horseshoe courts, removal of the RV waste dump and where the alternative might be, a need for to consider the connection to the regional trail system, a desire to see a crosswalk across Clackamette Drive, a little bit further south on Clackamette Drive, closer to Dune Drive. Concerns about public art locations in the floodplain and signage. Pull-through RV sites as opposed to back in. Native tree planting considerations and concerns about funding. So the comments that were about design and amenities are valid as public input, and we wanted to discuss with the Planning Commission a way for you guys to potentially move those forward. But we want to point out that they are not germane to the approval criteria, with the exception of the comments about trail connections. There are findings in the staff report about transportation system plan projects which are related to the regional trail system and would be part of a detailed development plan submittal and a requirement to make the connection over to Clackamette, the Clackamas River Trail, and ultimately over to the Willamette River Trail plan down 99E, which are all projects that are in the works of various stages of design. 99E, for example, is in the process of going through phase 3 design and planning to take the pedestrian pathway from 12th Street down to the curve at the Blue Heron Paper Mills, or Tumwater project site. So those are going on at the same time. Likewise, funding is not a consideration for approval criteria for the general development plan. One of the reasons for the general development plan is so that the Parks Department can seek funding for subsequent site development. There was also, nope, that's everything as far as comments go. And I hope I addressed most of what we heard with respect to those, but if we didn't, we'd be happy to talk more about that. So staff's recommendation for the Planning Commission tonight, your options are to approve GLUA 2312, MAS 2301 with conditions as recommended by staff, or approve the application with conditions that you modify, or not approve the application. And I'm staying ready to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Start over with Commissioner Staggs. Any questions for staff? Do it.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay. Oh, that thing's loud. Was EV charging stations considered?
At this stage of planning, no. That's definitely something that, you could move forward potentially. It is a requirement for us to, it's a separate state requirement for us to do EV charging planning with site-specific development plans. So that's a part of the requirements of the climate-friendly and equitable communities statewide planning rules. And one of those is EV charging. So depending on the development type, it's built into the building code as well as a requirement. So new parking lots would have to provide EV charging stations. I'm not exactly sure how many, but we could find that information out.
Okay, yeah. I mean, wow, this thing is so loud. The current projections, just for everyone's information, and this is not like a deep dive investigation, but generally right now, the projections are that 10% of cars on the road by 2025 will be electric. By 2030, it'll be 30%, and by 2050, 50%. So I think it'd be great if, as a city, we said, we're gonna recognize that and build electric vehicle charging at a public amenity. And then you can always future-proof it so that maybe on day one, it's 10%, but you can put the infrastructure in so that you can upgrade it later, as EVs become more and more. I mean, you can kind of see them out there now. They're becoming more and more prevalent on the road. I was curious also about who's going to be the RV park operator. Is the city going to take on that responsibility?
I don't know it. I defer to Brian, perhaps can answer that. Brian
Okay.
Martin, who's representing the applicant.
Okay, those are my questions.
On the EV question, the House bill that talks about electric vehicle charging talks about new parking spaces have to provide 20% of those spaces, up to 20% EV charging spaces. For mixed use and multifamily, it's not clear how that would affect institutional development. But I think it's mostly geared towards housing development. We'd have to look into it to see what's applicable to park and institutional development. There's still some rulemaking going on at the state level about this.
All right, Commissioner Laws, any questions?
So, excuse me, considering the dump for garbage, has there been specifics on, are we looking at charging and having a dump area? I saw it in the plans, but is there any more specifics on it at this point?
No, I'm afraid I don't have any more information about that.
And then the horseshoes, how many are we looking at if you're keeping them? Do we have any idea yet?
The horseshoe pits?
Yeah.
Don't know off the top of my head. Brian can talk to that when he comes up on the record, yeah.
Sounds good, thank you.
I'll look in the meantime, too.
Vice Chair Schlagenhofer?
My turn already. All right, it looks like most of the things that we have or should have some control over, it looks like they've been addressed in the conditions of approval. I do like what Commissioner Staggs brought up, and this is something I've brought up with staff and Public Works several times, that some of our recent projects, including this building, including the Public Works building, has no EV charging. The answer I've got is we've been designing them in a way where it's not going to be hard to add. So that's what I've been told. The demand for the charging, as far as the staff that they have, isn't really demanding it, or it's not a big requirement right now. But if the requirement shows itself, it's not going to be hard or expensive. They're not going to have to change the transformers. They're not going to have to cut all the blacktop back out to put in the infrastructure. It sounds like there's utility vaults. It sounds like it's going to be minor, and it's an expense that it's not going to be 4 times as expensive to put it in later. That's the answer I've gotten, and I'm okay with that. So, I mean, that's what I've found, and that's about all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner West, any questions?
I just have a couple comments to add to. I would like to see the park, since we, took all the public comment on things that they'd like in it, that it would be able to have festival and event spaces. Now, I'm not saying anything in there now is precluding those uses, but I just want to keep that at the forefront too. I see they'll have more parking, which will be nice. So that's my only comment.
All right, Commissioner Espy.
No questions.
Thank you. A couple of questions, just some definitions. What is a charter park? What does that mean?
In the Oregon City Municipal Code charter, in the charter of the city, there are parks designated as charter parks. And that means that they are designated for city public recreational use in perpetuity, and any change materially or physically in the use of that would require voter approval. So that's what the charter is all about.
Okay. And the designation as a regional park, who made that designation, and what does that functionally mean?
Again, I'll probably defer to Brian on the regional park thing, because it can mean different things in different places, but it usually refers to a certain service area that it's large enough to accommodate that regional need and use, and it has larger parking facilities to accommodate that. It's also the only point of entry into the river with the boat ramp for some length of the shoreline there. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any follow-up questions from anyone? All right. It doesn't look like we have any, 15 minutes for the applicant. Skipped over you, sorry, apologize. Come on up.
think I'll take all 15 minutes to, I'll be closer. I think it is on. Should I start over? Or Brian Martin with Lango Hansen Landscape Architects, located in Portland, Oregon. We're the project landscape architect consulting with the Parks Department on the Clackamette Park Master Plan. And I don't believe I'll take all 15 minutes to address the questions that have been raised, but just going through, speaking to what I can and on Kendall and Parks' behalf in terms of the operation of the RV park. As it is today, it is maintained and operated by the Parks Department, so they do the maintenance on that. And my understanding is that that would carry on with the relocation of it. It would operate in the same or similar way. In terms of the horseshoes, the numbers and the layout of that, that's not something that we have gotten to the point of redesigning. I think as we move forward with the more specific detailed development plan, that we would look at specifically how that fits in with the overall plan and weighing that with other public feedback that we got throughout the whole process as well. The EV charging is a really great point, and it's, as the commissioner pointed out, it's something that's increasing in demand every year, and it's something that we on all of our projects are seeing, at least allocating, as was pointed out, the infrastructure. If it's not ready on day one, there's the conduit that's in place, there's the vaults that are in place so that it's plug and play and can be added. A nuance to this site specifically, as we touched on last time, is all the electrical hookups in the current location of the RV park are flooded every year. So there's a lot of damage and a lot of repair work that has to be done every year. So I think looking ahead, I think what one solution to that might be kind of front loading some of that parking near the RV park, the proposed location on those lots across the street. It's much higher and out of the floodplain, and there is proposed vehicular parking over there. So that might be a good alternate for the electrical charging stations out of the floodplain. And lastly, I think Pete described the regional park category quite well. I think that the one thing to add is just some of the amenities specific to this, like the boat launch and the RV park. They're much more of a regional draw as opposed to a community park or neighborhood park. So it's the volume of parking and the type of amenities that draw folks from farther, not just within the city, but from the region itself.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Espy, questions?
None.
None? Commissioner West? Okay, Vice Chair Schlagenhofer? Go for it.
It's a small observation I've seen about electric charging. I've seen it more successful in places where it'll put the electric charging in the back, away from the front row. And in the front row, it seems to cause resentment between, with the people that drive gas cars. And they'll park a pickup truck and stick it in the grill. So, I mean, I think to avoid that and make them more usable, it'd be best to put them where they're, you know, not front row, not prime real estate. That's just something I've seen. As far as, if we're gonna run the vaults and the infrastructure somewhere, maybe put them in the back.
That's a good point.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Laws?
The only thing I'd like to say is we are a pioneer town, historic town, and part of that park's history is the horseshoes. So I'd really like to see it to where people can come to our park and do their annual competitions and to have some type of plan, just so that they don't disappear in the process.
And in answer to your question, Commissioner Laws, the public comment about this at the last meeting stated that there are 20 courts and 8 of those are covered. Covered courts, 8 of them are covered.
All right, Commissioner Staggs, any questions?
No.
No? All right. Boy, I had the question, I just lost it again. This is more for staff, but I'll ask it now. The zoning code comprehensive plan amendments, are those subject to the 120-day rule or not?
Yeah, they are.
They are?
They will be. A type 4 application.
No, I'm sorry, within this 120-day?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
No, this is condition of approval is kind of deferring that to a separate process.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Do we have any public comment? Like it? You have another 5 minutes if you want to have anything else you want to say.
I think we spoke to it last time.
Fair enough. All right, thank you. All right, discussion. Anybody have any thoughts, comments, want to make a motion, whenever you open up the floor?
Question. Do we know what the approximate budget is? I know you guys talked about funding, but do we know what the approximate budget is for the project?
I don't have that information.
No, the kind of what it sounds like is, in order to seek funding, they need to have this plan in place so that they can go out to get grant funds or budget for such
Okay.
this phase or that phase or.
That's correct. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, okay. I was just curious.
Yeah.
I move we approve GLUA 23-00012, MAS 23-00001.
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All right, call the vote, please.
Commissioner Staggs?
Aye.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Laws?
Aye.
Commissioner Espy?
Aye.
Vice Chair Schlagenhofer?
Aye.
Chair Stoll?
Aye. And motion carries. All right. We'll move on to communications. Thank you for coming tonight.
Over her last meeting, crossing Luba appeal. So I will turn it over to Carrie.
Thank you. As I think most of you know, the Park Place Crossing Master Plan denial by the City Commission was appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals. And the Land Use Board of Appeals issued a decision in early June or mid-May and remanded. The outcome was to remand the decision back to the city. Luba found errors in the way the city made its decision. And those errors come from the result of a state law, the needed housing laws that I know you all are familiar with. The most directly applicable one is 197-307 sub 4. And what it says is that when a local government approves or considers an application for housing, development for housing, it can only apply clear and objective standards. And I know you all have heard that before because we've talked about it a lot with legislative amendments where we've changed the code in order to provide criteria that are clear and objective. A clear and objective standard that is one that doesn't require the exercise of discretion or policy-making judgment. So whether the setback is 8 feet doesn't require judgment. 8 feet is 8 feet. If it's 35 feet high, it doesn't require exercise of policy judgment. Discretionary criteria are things like, is it compatible with the neighborhood? Those kinds of things are vague and gray and require some evaluation of the language of the standard and the evidence presented to determine if the standard is met. And so those kinds of standards are not clear and objective. And so that's what the statute says. It says when you're reviewing an application for the development of housing, you can only apply clear and objective standards. So that's the general rule. So that's why when we review applications for building permits, we have to apply only clear and objective standards, and they don't come before you because there is no discretion. So there is an alternative track to the clear and objective track provided in state law. And it says that in addition to an approval process for needed housing based on clear and objective standards, a local government may adopt or apply an alternative approval process for applications and permits for residential development based on approval criteria regulating in whole or in part appearance or aesthetics that are not clear and objective if the applicant retains the option of proceeding under a clear and objective track. So it's a two-track system. You've got a clear and objective track, and you've got an alternative track. And as long as an applicant has the option of pursuing a clear and objective track, and they elect the discretionary track, then there's no problem with applying discretionary standards. So that's the state law framework that this application was challenged under. And the argument that the Icon development, as the appellant made to Luba, was that Icon did not have a clear and objective track. They didn't have an alternative track. Their only option was the general development plan option, and that option was not clear and objective. And Luba agreed with them that there was no alternative track. There was no alternative clear and objective track that they could have elected. What the city argued was that a couple of things. The reason why Icon had to go through a general development plan review was because there was a condition of approval attached to the annexation decision in 2017. And that condition of approval said, prior to issuing any development approval authorized by this annexation and zone change, the applicant shall obtain general and detailed development plan approval that includes the approximately 92-acre property pursuant to OCMC 1765. So that's the criterion that required them to do general development plan approval. But the condition goes on to say, until such time, all development shall conform to the requirements in the county's FU10 zoning. And what the city argued was that the alternative clear and objective track was the county's FU10 zoning. That was the choice they had. If they wanted to take advantage of the city's low and medium density residential zoning, they had to go through a general development plan. And if they didn't want to do discretionary review through general development plan, then they had to go with the county's FU10 zoning. And that approach makes some sense because when you look back in 2017, when the city was reviewing the annexation and zone change proposal, Icon didn't have a design.
Didn't have what?
A design, a development plan. They didn't know, they didn't propose exactly where the roads would go, and they didn't propose exactly where the stormwater detention would go. They didn't propose a number of lots. They didn't propose any of that stuff. They said it was feasible to serve places, but they didn't identify where the steep slopes would be. They didn't know all of that in 2017, and the city said, okay, we'll give you a conditional zone change because we're essentially kicking that evaluation, that discretionary evaluation that would have happened at the zone change down to a master plan review. And so that was the argument that the city made before Luba, and Luba disagreed. Luba said that the clear and objective track alternative has to be a city-adopted scheme, not the county-adopted scheme. And so as a result, Luba found that the general development plan review had to be clear and objective, and therefore only those criteria that are clear and objective can apply to this application. And so the scope of the remand is for the city to go back and decide which of the master plan criteria, OCMC 1765, are clear and objective. And some of those standards from, so some of the 1765 standards are things like, does the application comply with the master plan? Well, some of the master plan policies are things like, don't build on slopes over 25%. Well, not building on slopes over 25% is clear and objective, right? 25% is 25%. We can measure it, doesn't take discretion. Some of the other criteria that apply to the master plan are things like alley loading. You'll remember that was a critical thing. Alley loading, you have to have a certain percentage of houses have to be alley loaded. I don't remember exactly what the number is, but that is a clear and objective standard. But, you know, so it will be up to the city to make that determination if on remand. So the city has appealed this decision to the Oregon Court of Appeals. We have briefed our case. We submitted our brief last week. ICON will be submitting their brief in response in the next 2 weeks. So I think we'll have their brief about the 20th of July. And oral argument will take place on the 27th of July at 9 a.m. And then the Court of Appeals will issue a decision. It can vary a couple of months to 6 months, 8 months.
Carrie, I've got a question.
Yeah.
If the city had done the comprehensive planning and establishment of preordained zoning designations and master plan criteria during the time before the property was annexed, and as a part of the periodic review of comprehensive plan, would we be working with more clear and objective criteria, vis-a-vis the adoption of master plan criteria during that preliminary time, or so that it's preordained when the property is annexed, and all of those requirements are baked in as a part of that annexation, instead of annexing in with a county zoning designation and then having to go through the awkward period of zoning the property as a part of the comprehensive plan after instead of before. Would we have more clear and objective standards in that case?
I believe, Commissioner
Nothing we can do about it now, but it's a policy question that I'm just asking about.
Yeah, so I believe, Commissioner Espy, yes, that the obligation, that if the city had implemented the concept plan into its zoning in a more complete way before it annexed this land, it would have had more clear and objective standards. But that said, the city did implement some of the concept plan zoning into the code with design standards, the things that say alley loading, and there are design standards that apply specifically to Park Place, and those are clear and objective.
Good.
So could it have been more robust? Yes. If this decision stands, this is 92 acres of 300 or 400 acres, I believe, in Park Place. So there will be opportunity for the city to implement zoning for those other acres if that's how this turns out.
I guess
It seems like it's a chicken and egg problem largely, because the city doesn't have the ability to go out and ground truth all of the specific areas where roads will go and, parks will be, and we want to give applicants flexibility.
Right.
And so it's a difficult position, I think, for cities to be in.
But I think we can still do it from a standpoint of a housing needs analysis. And there can be a lot of good decisions that can be made at the time of, before the properties are annexed, and establishing those zoning designations beforehand, before the properties get annexed, so that they get assigned, as a part of that annexation process. And they are already, all of the housing needs and all of that data is already baked into the process, and you don't have to keep going through that analysis each time you annex properties for compliance with at least just housing needs, but you can also apply it to other things as well, I think.
I think that's a good suggestion.
Commissioner Staggs, you have the light on?
I was just curious, why did we why did the city appeal the Luba decision?
To get further guidance on the scope of the clear and objective obligation. The clear and objective obligation applies to the development of housing. And for example, Commissioner Espy's suggestion that the city could adopt zoning in order to bake in more of its concept plan as part of a zoning implementation scheme. I think under Luba's ruling, there's an argument that that zoning decision may be development of housing because it will ultimately result in the implementation of housing. And when we are at the front lines of expanding urban growth boundaries to urbanize land on the edges of our city, it's really important that we know exactly where that line is. Because under Luba's ruling, annexation could be subject to clear and objective standards because it will result in the development of housing. An urban growth boundary expansion could be necessary for the development of housing, and that could be subject to clear and objective standards only. And right now, the state law that applies to urban growth boundary expansions is not clear and objective. So what we were trying to do is get better direction on where that line is exactly. And it has only been since 2019 that the clear and objective obligation is applied to all housing and not just needed housing, meaning housing that is inventoried to further a need. And so the scope of the application of the statute is much broader than it has ever been before. And so we're sort of creating new case law here in a way that it doesn't exist today.
Assuming that it comes back, assuming that that Luba's decision stands, will it come back before the Planning Commission?
It will be up to the city commission to decide whether or not they want to remand it back or if they want to make a decision in the first instance. There's nothing in the code that talks about remand procedures one way or the other.
Okay.
You talked about the two options of tracks, the discretionary or the clear and objective. If a developer goes down one track, are they able to switch back to the other one if they're unsuccessful? If the developer wants to go down discretionary and it gets turned down, can they go back and start over again on clear and objective for the same development?
I'm for substantially similar. No, they could go the other, they can switch tracks. If they are denied, they can switch.
Any other questions? Yeah, go for it.
I'll talk about it a little bit. I think we talked about it too much during the entire process, but I'll revisit it a little bit. I'm not sure who's right or wrong at this point. The applicant's argument that we weren't clear and objective, it's a little hard to swallow when you look back at all the variances that they asked for from our standards. They had a concept plan that was adopted. Their development didn't look like it. The density was off. It was a book of variances, and then they're saying we weren't clear. Well, I think they wouldn't have needed variances if they would have just made it look the way it was supposed to look, and it would have been a lot easier for that to get through. That's just my opinion. Do we remember how many variances they requested? How many conditions of approval? Was it 73 or?
I don't remember how many conditions of approval, but there was one variance and 3 adjustments at the start and I think 2 at the end.
Yeah, it was, they definitely asked for a lot. I don't think we were that unreasonable with it as far as my opinion on it, but I'm curious where it goes. Thank you.
All right, any other comments or questions? All right, thank you for that.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
The only other communication item is that at this point, we don't have anything scheduled for July 24th, so tonight's our only July meeting, and just stay tuned in your email for August meetings, so.
All right, sounds good, thank you.
Oh, and we talked about this last time, but the volunteer appreciation is July 25th, I believe. It's yeah, like the last Tuesday, it's a Tuesday, July 25th, at the Pioneer Center.
July 25th.
July 25th, yeah.
All right, any communications from any of the commissioners? No? All right, we're adjourned, thank you.